Tonight, when the sun goes down, you're going to flip a switch. Light will flood the room, and you won't think twice about it. But for almost the entire span of human existence, that switch didn't exist. When the sun set, the world went dark. Truly dark. And in that darkness, your ancestors were afraid. Not of ghosts, not of monsters under the bed, of something far more real and far stranger than you'd expect. You probably assume ancient humans feared the dark because they couldn't see danger coming. That's partly true, but the real answer goes deeper than simple blindness. It goes into the architecture of your brain, into the social structure of early human bands, and into a specific measurable threat that shaped nighttime behavior for hundreds of thousands of years. The story of what your ancestors feared after dark is really the story of why you still flinch at a strange noise in a quiet house. Start with the obvious threat: predators. For most of human evolutionary history, your ancestors were not the apex predator they imagined themselves to be today. Lions, hyenas, leopards, and saber-toothed cats all hunted primates, and many of them hunted at night specifically because human night vision is poor compared to nocturnal hunters. A human standing in open grassland at dusk was, biologically speaking, exposed. Not powerful. Exposed. Biologist Liana Zanet has spent years studying what ecologists call the landscape of fear, the invisible map of danger that shapes where and how prey animals move, even when no predator is actually present. Her research on animals like deer and raccoons shows that the mere sound of a predator, played through a hidden speaker, is enough to change feeding behavior, alertness, and reproduction for weeks afterward. Fear itself, not just the predator, becomes a force that reshapes behavior. Apply that same logic to early humans clustered on the savannah, and you get a species primed to treat darkness itself as a signal of danger, whether or not a predator was actually nearby that night. Here's the part most people miss. It wasn't really about seeing predators, it was about not being able to see them. Human eyes rely heavily on color vision and detail, both of which collapse in low light. Your ancestors' eyes gave them almost no advantage after sunset. Meanwhile, the animals hunting them had evolved specifically for those conditions: eyes built for low light, hearing built for the rustle of a body moving through grass. Night flipped the entire power dynamic of the ecosystem. During the day, a group of humans with sticks and stones in numbers could hold their own. At night, that advantage evaporated. So what did they do about it? They built a fire. And fire changed everything, not just physically, but psychologically and socially. Anthropologist Richard Wrangham has argued that the controlled use of fire was one of the most transformative developments in human evolution, not simply because it provided warmth and cooked food, but because it extended the useful day. For the first time, humans had hours of firelit time in which they were not eating, not foraging, not fleeing. They were sitting together in a small circle of light, surrounded by a much larger circle of darkness they could not see into. Think about what that arrangement does to a person's mind. You are safe, relatively, inside the light. But you know the darkness around you is full of things you cannot detect. Every rustle beyond the firelight becomes a question mark. Every silence becomes suspicious in its own way. This is likely the exact psychological condition that gave rise to a huge portion of early human storytelling. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner studied the Ju-Hoanzi Bushmen of the Kalahari Desert and found something remarkable about how their conversation changes after dark. During the day, most talk was practical: disputes, complaints, economic negotiation. But at night, around the fire, conversation shifted almost entirely to storytelling, myth, and social bonding. Wiesner's research suggests that firelight didn't just protect people physically, it created a specific social space where imagination, cooperation, and cultural transmission could happen, precisely because the darkness beyond the fire had already put everyone on the same emotional footing. Shared vulnerability, in other words, may have been the seed of shared storytelling. This is where your fear of the dark starts to look less like a bug and more like an inherited survival tool with a strange side effect. The same instinct that made your ancestors huddle closer to the fire when they heard something move in the grass is the instinct that makes you check twice that your front door is locked before bed. The specific predators are gone, The circuitry that watched for them is not. Sleep itself carries fingerprints of this history. Anthropologist Carol Worthman has studied sleep patterns across dozens of small-scale societies that still live without electric light and found something that challenges the modern assumption of one long, unbroken night of sleep. In many of these communities, people wake several times during the night, sometimes for long stretches, often to tend a fire, check on children, or simply sit quietly in a state of watchful rest. Segmented sleep like this may not be a modern sleep disorder at all. It may be closer to the original human pattern, a nervous system still partially on guard, even in rest. Because for most of human history, fully checking out for 8 uninterrupted hours in the dark was a luxury very few environments could safely offer. Consider what that means for you the next time you wake up at 3 in the morning for no obvious reason. Heart beating slightly faster, ears straining for a sound you can't quite place. You are not malfunctioning. You are running a very old subroutine, one built for a world where a fully unconscious human in total darkness was, statistically, a vulnerable one. There's a reason horror movies rely so heavily on darkness, silence, and the unknown just outside the frame, rather than showing the monster directly. Filmmakers have intuitively rediscovered something your ancestors knew in their bones. It is not the visible threat that triggers the deepest fear response. It is the invisible one, the thing you cannot see, cannot verify, cannot rule out. Your brain treats uncertainty in darkness as more dangerous than a known threat in daylight, because for nearly all of human history, that was the accurate read on reality. None of this means you are living in constant low-grade danger today. Most modern environments carry none of the predation risk your ancestors faced, but the psychological wiring built to detect and respond to nighttime threat did not have time to update itself for streetlights, locked doors, and smartphone flashlights. It still runs the old software. That is why an unfamiliar creak in an empty house at night can trigger a genuine spike in heart rate that the same creak heard in broad daylight never would. There is something almost beautiful hidden in this ancient fear, though. The same darkness that once endangered your ancestors is also, indirectly, responsible for some of the most human things about you. The instinct to gather closer to others when uncertain. The impulse to tell stories to make sense of what you cannot see. The strange comfort of a small circle of light and familiar voices when the world outside feels unknowable. Fear of the dark didn't just protect early humans from predators. It may have helped build the social and cultural machinery that makes you recognizably human today. So tonight, when you flip that switch and light floods the room without a second thought, remember what that simple action represents. For nearly the entire history of your species, that light did not exist, and the absence of it was one of the most defining and dangerous facts of daily life. You are not afraid of the dark because something is wrong with you. You are afraid of the dark because for a very long time, being afraid of it kept your ancestors, and eventually you, alive long enough to flip that switch at all.